Welcome to the International Teacher Podcast with your host, Matt the Family Guy, Kent the Cat Guy, Jacqueline from JP Mint, and Greg the Single Guy, bringing you episodes from around the world about the best kept secret in education. You've got it, international teaching. Welcome to the show. All right, this is Greg the Single Guy coming in with ITP, the International Teacher Podcast. Welcome back again. Kent the Cat Guy is coming in from Saudi. Hello, buddy.
Hi, great to be here.
And JP Mint, as always, is down there in Mexico. How is everything in Mexico?
Wonderful, beautiful, nice and cold at 12 degrees Celsius. I love it.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'd rather have a little colder. But anyway, our special guest on this episode is Amy Perrier-Morin, and she's calling in from Houston, Texas. Hello, Amy.
Hi. Thank you for having me today.
No problem. Hey, Amy, can you give us the elevator version of education, where you fit in, and sort of maybe where you've taught before or what you're doing now? Just give us a little bit of background.
So pretty much in a few words, I would say that I love international teaching. I started out in public school systems and I always wanted to teach abroad. So I felt like that was my calling. So I went overseas. And I worked at different international schools from different parts of the world. I got to work with diverse students. So that was one of the things that made me want to stick into teaching, is the perspectives and the cultures that the schools have at the in the student body. And I came back here. I'm still a teacher, and I'm in one of probably the most diverse schools I've probably actually taught at. So this is a great opportunity to have here, and I get to work with students all over, and part of my actual title is Cultural Acclimation Specialist. So I get to work with students from different parts of the world, especially new ones. So it's really
Can
cool.
you say that again? You're the Cultural
Acclimation Specialist.
I love that.
the CAS.
Yeah.
So tell us what I've never heard of that position. What is your job like?
So it's quite a new title, and our admin has decided on this position because we feel like we have so many students that come from everywhere around the world: Brazil, Saudi Arabia, many parts in Europe, Asia. And they felt like we have a bunch of these students that come here and they don't feel like they don't know where to start and how to acclimate. And, America's huge and there's so many different styles of ways we do things. And I'm here to help the students, make the transition easier for them. I created this program for students that are led by my fourth grade students who've been at Village at the school for a very long time. And they get to, lead these peer supported groups to help these students, feel like they're at home, but they also are exposed to learning different languages, get to share their languages and cultures, traditions, and, building that support system and making them feel like they're belonging and they're included in my school. So that's what I do.
Wow. It sounds like you have the best of both worlds. You still have that sort of international bubble almost, but within a very familiar home country. That is impressive. Can we dive into your international experience just a little bit? Because we'd love to hear, how did you get overseas? How did you learn about it?
Long story short, I was married previously. I know this is probably TMI. And the person I was with at the time didn't want to live abroad. And I was like, I really want to live abroad. I want to go somewhere. I just want to get out of this country because I feel like there's something else out there for me. So long story short, we didn't make it through. We ditched him.
You ditched him. Nice.
Ditched him and got on a plane.
I got on a plane and left and never looked back. So I had a interview with a company I went through a recruitment agency called the International Educator. And that's how I started applying all these jobs. And then I got a few callbacks, and one was from China in Shanghai. And I was speaking to one of the head directors or the head of school. And I was upstairs having this interview, and I was living with my parents at the time. I came downstairs after the interview, and I was like, I'm moving to China. And my parents...
Just like that.
I'll see you.
Hi, Mom. I'm going to China.
Going to China, and I'm leaving in 6 months. I got to get all this stuff together. I haven't thought about all the process, the visa, like nothing like that. So that's another story of a visa, of the fun international stuff that you don't get told about as you learn as you go. And then I moved abroad. I taught in Shanghai for a few years, and I still wanted to continue on with my teaching experience. And I got a job in Ho Chi Minh City, Saigon, Vietnam. That's
HCMC.
where, huh?
HCMC. Yeah. For the cool
HCMC.
kids.
It's like one of my favorite places to ever go. If I could go back, I'd probably go back there in a heartbeat. And I actually, like 2 months later, I met my now husband, who we met on Tinder.
And he was in Vietnam as well.
Yeah, he just moved there, I think like a month or so after I arrived. And I remember clearly someone was saying, like, you'll never, the dating pool is really hard there and you will never find anybody. And lo and behold. So.
Sorry.
Greg is getting a phone call, everyone.
Greg, everyone in the world Greg knows is online with him. Who's calling you?
I only get called when I'm online in an interview.
Always.
That's it. I'm sorry, a total interruption here, but hey, I have a question. So you met your husband in Vietnam. Did you guys go and teach somewhere together after that?
We did. So we decided to part Ho Chi Minh City and find another job where we both can go together. And we ended up in Cairo, Egypt. So he worked at one international school, and then I went to another international school. And then a year later, while we're there, he moved to my school and worked at the same school. So that was, yeah.
Stop. Anyway, I apologize again. So question, and you may not want to say it on the air. Some guests do, some guests don't. I taught in Cairo for a year at the ESOL schools, and I lived in Mahdi right next to CAC. And
Yeah.
Did you teach at CAC?
I didn't, but I worked at an ESOL school. I wonder if we were at the same school.
Huh?
My God, but mine was like 100 years ago. I think it was 2004 to 5. And it was before they moved into a new place. So they had purposely built one the year that I was teaching there. And then we had to transfer and move everything. But I left. It wasn't the kind of school for me.
Yeah.
But I was just asking because I do have a connection. Before you continue, I have a connection because my friend Dolly Shallop. Hello, Dolly. How are you out there? Woohoo! A lot of people know Dolly, and she works at CAC. She's Egyptian, went to college with me. Small story, right? Small world story. And a lot of people I even work with now know Dolly. So it was just a shot in the dark. If you knew Dolly.
Do you
I
know
don't
Dolly,
but-
Amy?
I do not know Dolly, but if we, it's such a small world. But if we do, I probably would know her, maybe, because it was Mahdi. Mahdi is such a small neighborhood. That's where we lived too.
In what year, Amy, were you in Egypt?
I was there 2018 to 2021.
Ooh, during
you
the
were there for the
Arab Spring.
And that lovely COVID time.
Had COVID.
And
Oh, you got
COVID.
the
Double
double
header.
fecta. Yes.
Oh,
Wow.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Ooh.
So what we're talking about, maybe 6, 7 years, 8 years overseas?
Yeah, about 7 years overseas.
Yep.
And I was supposed to move back to Shanghai, but COVID happened and I could not get a visa at the time. And my husband, dependents at the time couldn't go in. So we got married in 2021, hoping that I would get a visa, bring him with me to China. And unfortunately, due to restrictions, they were unable to get me a visa. And I had to depart and break that contract. And I had to find a job. And I was jobless from like May to July of 2021, and then I got a job in Houston. So that's how I ended up in Houston.
Wow. You had been looking back to move back home, so to speak, and the international circuit.
I was planning on not to move back. I was hoping to keep continuing on with my international journey. But with COVID, things happened, and we decided both were like, let's just move back to the US. It might be safer at this moment. And him getting the visa for him to come into the US would be a little bit easier than trying to be in 2 different countries at the time and not knowing when we'd see each other. That was a big struggle. So that was a big pathway we had to kind of choose in the fork in the road that we had to decide like what was best for both of us. So that was hard.
Amy, did you grow up in Houston?
I did not. So when people say where I'm from, it's kind of hard to tell them where
I love that question. Yeah.
Like, you don't have a home place because I moved so much as a kid. I grew up in Pennsylvania, And then I moved to North Carolina for a number of years, moved abroad, different places. My parents moved to Florida. So I go back there to Florida, visit them, and now I'm in Houston. So it's hard to say where you're
It's just like the kids at international schools. I
Yeah.
love asking that. I mean, I don't ask that question, and if I catch myself once in a while doing it, but I love the look on their face. They're confused. It's like, I don't know. Matt Judd, who is the other co-host of this show, one of the founders of the show, he has 4 boys. And I love telling this story that he would, people ask his little boys where they're from, and they say, well, Minnesota and Saudi and Maldives, and the little boys will be like, Dad, when are we going to go back home to the Maldives? And he's like, I can't afford it. But that identity of where, you have no roots really, depending on what your life was
Or
like
you have
earlier.
roots in several
Right.
places.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Yeah, a lot of us are the same, but the kids are a lot like that too. And you can probably really feel empathy towards the kids that are coming to Houston in this field that you're in right now, and reach out to them, and you know exactly how they feel.
Right.
love
It's like
that.
that third culture kid experience, and we're third culture adults. So that kind of helps them understand. Like when we talk about like, oh, I am a third culture kid, because I don't feel like I have that specific home around the world.
She coined a phrase, you're a TCA, third
Yeah.
culture adult.
TCA,
I don't think that's been
Not to
said
be confused
before.
with
I think you're the
TNA.
first one.
not TNA.
Come on, it's not that bad episode.
family
JP.
show.
Excuse her, Amy. Our boss is a little bit off the rails tonight.
Amy, let's talk about your repatriation experience. What made you choose Houston? You're in Egypt. You're not returning to an overseas assignment because of the way the world is at that moment. How did you decide where you would go?
I believe it was with the director at the time. She was explaining how Houston was. And she's like, the school that I work at is a very international school. And it feels like you were saying, Jacqueline, like it's a bubble, like an international bubble that you feel like you're there, but you're not overseas, but you are overseas at the same time, if that makes sense. And that you kind of have like this community that people understand you more. And that's where it kind of gravitated towards that decision of picking this school in Houston, because it was really something I was drawn to. And I wanted to still feel like I'm overseas, but I'm not, but in my home country where, things are familiar. So I think that's that decision. In Houston, the food is great. I will say the food is very diverse. I think that was another factor because I'm a huge foodie. So
Well, you must have loved Vietnam then, maybe Egypt too, with the food. So did you get the job before you moved back to Houston, or was it the other way around?
So funny story, when I had to cut my contract in May with China, I had no job, but my parents said, come back to Florida, stay with us for a few months, because we said no to our school in Egypt, and we were like leaving the lease, and I was like, I can't extend this with no job. So my parents were very generous. They were offering us to stay. So we booked a ticket to just go straight with our cats, our luggages, and go straight to Florida. And I would figure it out from there. And then that was mid-July was our flight. But beginning of July, that's when I got the interview for Houston, and I got accepted. And literally within a week, I was like, I have a job. We are moving to Houston. But with Florida, I was like, all right, my starting job date time is end of July. So I have barely 2 weeks in Florida to figure out my stuff, a living situation, buying a car and getting an apartment picked out from living in Florida, because I wanted to find a place before we packed all our stuff and drove across the lovely state of Texas. So it was like a whirlwind of 2 weeks, I would say. I don't remember anything except the stress levels of finding the things, getting settled before we made our way to Houston.
And it's weird because you don't expect that when you go home when you go back to the U.S., if I may, or your home country, like Canada, like JP. But you don't expect that kind of like going between two different countries overseas, going from China to Egypt or China to Vietnam to Egypt. There were times in between, and you knew you were stepping into it. You're like, okay, I have what I have in my suitcase, yada, yada, yada. But when you go home, in my mind, I would think that if I repatriate, I wouldn't have those kinds of problems. So it's new for me to hear what you're going through or what you went through. because thinking that if I go home, it's no problem. But you're going to Florida and you have 2 weeks and you don't even remember because you had to do so much stuff. That seems so easy to me. I mean, I'm saying from lack of experience. It sounds very easy, but it's not, I guess. That was your experience.
Yes. And then my husband, who's Canadian, he's worried about, visas for his documentation and paperwork. So we were like flying from Egypt to the US, and I had stress, like, I'm fine, of course. But for him, I'm like, he's coming with me, and anything can happen, with it comes to flights and paperwork and all that. And they were stressing him in Egypt, saying, well, you might have to, you have a one-way ticket to Florida, but they might deny you when you come to the States. And I'm like, this is not what I want to hear while we have everything packed up and have our cats in tow. And Francis, like, my husband's like, no, I think we're going to be fine because the regulations we read up on all the visas and all that stuff. And he's like, we'll be fine. We'll figure it out when we get to the States. I'm like, you're right. But it's the fear that people, that fear-mongering attitude, like, it's not a good idea. You might get rejected. Like, I couldn't
might
hear
get
this.
pulled into that side room and interrogated.
Oh, that was in my book about his... why he was pulled into security for another reason, which was not true. It's in my book. It's hilarious. But
What's the title of your book? Let's plug your book right now.
it's called Living Expatations, The Journey of Repatriation.
And is it already published? Is it out yet? Or
It is out. It came out almost a year ago on Amazon. So I can't believe it's been almost a year since it's been published.
And
I
we
haven't
find that book
seen it.
On
under
Amazon.
Amy Perrier, www.amazon.com, or wherever you find your finer books. Is that under the name Amy Perrier-Morin?
Yes, correct. So it would be easier.
All right. Expectations.
Yes.
Love it.
Living
People will autocorrect
expectations.
expectations.
When did you find time working full-time, moving countries, taking care of 2 cats, 3 cats? I don't know. When did you find time to write a book?
The time I would say I got up very early in the mornings. That was my writing time. And when as a teacher, sometimes having summers off really worked. But when I started writing this book, it was actually exactly 2 years ago around the Thanksgiving break time. So I went home to visit my family and I was like, maybe I should start writing a book. So I was in the airport and I was just starting to jot all my ideas down, and that's where it started. So every morning, for many times, long weekends too, I would just start writing and do all I can during my spare time.
All right. So give us a little synopsis of the book. Give us a little teaser.
So the book is about, fun experiences, good and bad, from not just my perspective, but from other people who had that same experiences as well. So they have their little quotes in there talking about how they're feeling about certain topics of what it's like to move back to their home country. But it's just a general sense to, to help connect with people who are facing the same experiences, the frustrations, the highs and lows of moving back to their home country.
So you were able to interview some other repatriates, and how did you find them? Were they already friends, or did you put an all call out somewhere?
That's a great question. So on Facebook, Instagram, I knew people who were like, yeah, I'm moving back to my home country. I was like, perfect. This is a great person to interview. So I would either do phone calls with them, video chat, send them questions through email, and I would just give them like some questions to give them, like, I said, here are the topics. I'm talking about my book. What are your experiences with these topics? And they would like send me like massive notes of all these topics. So I had to nitpick, pull out, and plug them into my chapters.
Is it mostly about adults, kids, families? Where is the stress of the, what age group are we talking about for repatriation?
So this would be more in the adult version. I wanted to make it more of adult focus. And eventually I would like to make a children's book that is focusing on the kids' perspective and kind of tie it into like a children's story series with third culture kids.
What did you learn talking to other repatriates? I guess that's a word. Thanks, JP, man. What did you personally learn talking to other people who went through the same experience?
That it's nice to feel that I'm not alone. Sometimes you do feel like you're like the outlier, the black sheep. You're like, no one understands me. But there are people who are like, who open up about their experience that makes you feel like, okay, I'm not the one who's the only one facing the same issue or problem or the same experiences. So that was a really good eye opener, and it was nice to, connect. It's a good time to laugh and joke, and you're like, yep, I get it. I totally understand where you're coming from. So that was a nice eye opener experience.
Yeah, go for it, Greg.
No, see, we're fighting for time. No. Let's fight about it, Kent. All right? Let's fight about who gets to answer questions.
Well, Greg lives next door, so I could literally walk over there. If you see two hands go on his camera,
And slap
you'll
me.
know. I just walked next door and grabbed him.
I'm just enjoying this because now I have like 3 new words. One is the third culture adult. The Expatations is a new. I love that word too. And also the word you just used is another
Repatriate?
Repatriate.
Repatriate.
For
I
me,
love that.
that's a new word. I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. And I thought I was cool because I made up technology and teaching and technology. I call it teachnology. But somebody else already said that one time. I felt really, So yeah, no one's ever heard of it. 'Cause I did make that word up. But anyway, here we go. I've got a great question for you, and it's not to do necessarily with the book. How
Could you have just
about
led with
this?
the question?
Oh my boss, get him off my back. No, listen, Amy, what is the one thing, if you were to just off the top of your head, what's the one thing that was the hardest for you to repatriate? Besides your husband with his visa, I mean, let's just say you're an American going back, and what's the hardest thing to get used to that you had overseas that you don't have back, or something like that?
I think the cost of things. I was very shocked to know that
Yes.
things here are like twice the price than what I would pay back over in an international,
Not only that, but when you left, presumably, going back in summers and stuff, you're kind of in that sort of vacation mode anyhow. But when you left, prices were one way. That's what I find. Prices were one way. Then you go home and you're like, how did this happen? But it was because, you left like 10, 20, 30, whatever years. And of course, prices go up. But yes, especially now, the prices have definitely gone up.
Yeah, because I feel like when, and you're like, wow, the penny doesn't stretch as far as here versus back overseas. You're like, oh, I can stretch this amount of money out for a good couple weeks. No, it wouldn't be gone in 2 days. So you're like, oh, wow, this is really expensive. So I think that's one of the biggest shocks for me and the hardest part of it, adjusting.
What was easier than you thought it would be?
Getting in a car. I was really shocked getting a car and getting I had to get a loan because I was not paying a chunk of cash for a used car, and I didn't want to buy a brand new car. So I was like, there's options. And that was a nice thing. I could understand things too, because when you're overseas, you're like, I need a translator. I don't understand what's happening. And you're depending on this person to help you with the communication with someone else who doesn't speak the same language as I do.
process. Yeah.
Yes. So I think buying the car was probably the easiest and the most effortless thing I could have done.
But let me ask a challenging question that I've recently learned about for our third culture kids when they repatriate, is that third culture kids, we talk a lot about the positives of third culture kids, about their resilience and their flexibility, but there's also studies done where they have more difficulties later in life. It turns out that some of the drug and alcohol use percentage is higher in our third culture kids. Divorce rates are higher. Do you think, I've never asked the question about third culture adults. Do you think there's some things, challenges that we have that aren't just the process of getting home, but of being home and establishing our lives here that we might not notice for years down the line?
That's a good question. I really think it's more having that support system. I feel like knowing that we're being heard and at least understood a little bit and have some empathy, I think that would go a long way. Because we feel like as an adult, it's hard to make friends and build in that community again, versus kids who are just they gravitate, they make friends a lot more easily than what we are as an adult. But I think just having that support group, and that's why I feel like bringing that together and making this aware, a huge awareness of what third culture adults may look like and what does it feel like to them. And knowing that, having that mind shift change that, it's okay that we might not feel like we're part of something, but we still belong in other parts with people, and we can connect with others, and that we're not all alone. I would guess that would be the best answer I can give. I know
That's
a
going to
hard
be
one.
interesting because
Very-
for me, I only have like 3 friends. I'm not including
Two of them are
Kent
here with you.
yeah, that's right. No, I'm talking about at home. So you're talking about a support group. I have family, which is strong, but I only have like 3 friends when I go home. And maybe it's just because I'm older and I choose to be that way. But we're not back in the U.S. making friends, like going out at night, yada, yada, yada. My friends are all over the world now, which is strange. So my support group, when I go home, is going to be a lot of family. And if I ever go home,
If you live in the
family.
same city as them as well.
Even if I
Yeah,
live in the same
exactly.
city, right?
Right.
Mhm.
So I can see how having your support group, your parents are in Florida and his are in Canada, I would imagine, and you're in Houston. So that's got to be difficult to get through that.
Yeah, it's hard too, because even when I lived in North Carolina at the time, I would come back and visit, and some people are like, I can't drive. I'm like, you can't drive 30 minutes, but I can fly like hours to come see you guys, but you can't make drive.
I could fly
So
around
that's
the
when
world to
kinda
see
realize
you,
you're like, well,
but
I'll pick the people who I really want to spend the time with, and that's crucial. So, and then I also talk to other expat teachers, and they feel the same way about how it's like, yeah, if they want to make time, they will. If not, that's on them. And you know, the people who will stand with you during the test of time.
is there a Facebook group of repatriated teachers that you're
There
in or
are some,
something?
but I made one not long ago, and it's called Finding Home After Abroad, Reverse Culture Shock Support.
That would be great.
Ooh,
And
right.
I'd love to
Can
go
we
in there.
join that?
Yeah,
Can we
go
join
in and
that?
hover?
Yes, anyone can join it. I need to like I'm building the community, and I'm trying to enjoy like the openness that people can share. And I think people are just a little bit nervous or don't know what to say. They're kind of feeling out. So I think that's just trying to get everyone together. But people have initiated conversations, which is really great.
Well,
we'll
we'll
put
reach
it in
out to
our
our
show
listeners, of
notes.
course. Yeah, we'll put it in
Yeah.
our show notes and try and get some people in on that, because I think it is it's one of those things on everybody's mind. I've talked to 4 people in the last 2 days that are going to be going back home to their country within the next year or 2, right? And it's going to be, there's a lot of thoughts, there's a lot of conversation going on, and I can't really add to it because I don't have the experience. So to direct them to your group that's the reason I asked, because it would be a great resource to have that, hopefully.
Thank you, Greg.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
All right, let's take a moment for a little commercial about how to get in touch with us. You can, of course, find all 4 of us at the itpexpat.com. That's www.itpexpat.com.
Or you could also find us at email at internationalteacherpodcast@gmail.com. We look forward to hearing from you.
Or if you're into Facebook, we have a new Facebook group at www.facebook.com/groups/ITPexpat, where you can find all kinds of inside information about ITP Expat.
You can also find us on Instagram at ITPXpats. That's with an S. ITPXpats is our handle.
All right, and thank you, listeners. We have over 100 countries represented by our listeners, and though we're not monetized, we are here for you, and we would like to thank all of you for listening. So let's get back to the show.
I'm thinking the days of the internet video calls certainly has helped. I think being able to still reach out to your friends around the world and feel like you've got sort of a foot in both camps, that has really helped with the internet. But finding your people in the city, that's got to be tough. Have you managed to find any other repatriates in Houston?
So I have been trying to take classes. A lot of people are from Houston or from another state or country, but they've been in Houston for like 10 plus years. It feels like a city where people stay. They're not meant to come here, but they end up staying here. I'll say that in short explanation. But I have found some friends. I work with a bunch of teachers who we all kind of came at the same time from different parts. Some of us have been from the same country, but we worked at different times in schools. So it's a very small international community. So that has helped having people come from other parts and come into this school. So yes, I have made friends in that. I have also made friends who are actually from Houston or from another state, but they understand and we connect, and it's been a little bit easier. But I also have my friends around the world, which also I keep in contact with them all the time as well. So I'm set. I feel good. I have a few friends I can hang out with here, connect with, but I also have my friends who are in different parts of the world that I feel like we're still really, really close. So it's
for
good.
Our listeners, and Kent and JP feel this way too.
Which
Amy,
is all of our listeners at the moment.
Which is all of us. Yeah, exactly. No, I love it when I go home as a teacher living overseas for 20 plus years. I go home and I still meet people and I can't connect with them because they want to talk about their mortgage. They want to talk about the Packers. They want to talk about what the gas station that disappeared down the road and it was replaced by something else. And they're, whatever. And I'm talking, I have to sort of put a different hat on. So it sounds like you've got a really special situation to have found some other teachers that did the same kind of thing you did because they can relate to you. And I have to I put on a new hat completely. I take off this hat, put on a different hat, and talk about teaching in general. And I usually tell people I teach out of state. And it sort of ends, it usually ends right there. And they don't have any, they're like, what state are you in? And I'm like, well, out of state. But for you, it sounds great that you could talk to somebody because you need to relate and you have so many stories to share and a book to sell, but you want to be like, hey, guess what happened to me in Vietnam and yada, 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 and Shanghai. And it's not like this in Egypt, but they turn off and they can't relate to it a lot of times, depending on who you're talking to.
Yeah, it's hard.
So, and Kent's neighbors don't want to talk to him either. Right. So he just goes home and he has a party and has two people over.
Wait a second.
Actually,
I thought you were his neighbor. That means you don't want to talk
No,
to him.
I'm talking going home to Washington. When he goes home to
yes,
Seattle,
yes.
Repatriation is the topic.
Great point.
JP, get into the topic.
I hate to encourage Greg's comments because, gosh knows, there's so many of them. But
all right, hey, that was a great show. I'll see you guys
Thank
later.
you so
I'm out of
much.
here.
Amy, is it different for men and women? Like, has your husband had as much success as you had? Because I often think that it might be tougher. I don't know. Do men have a harder time making friends in a new location? What's your experience been?
I don't want to, just based on his experience, but he has said multiple times that he said it is much harder for me to make friends here. And it's hard for me to connect. He's tried to join like certain groups, like jiu-jitsu groups, but a lot of them are from Houston. So, and he's like, I would like just to go out and have a beer. But they're like, well, I have family and a lot of people don't like to go out midweek. And, overseas, we're like, we can go out and have a drink midweek or go out for dinner easily. Here it's like, well, I'll put you in my calendar and let's schedule this out a few weeks or just the weekend because I don't have time during the week. So yes, he feels like it's been much tougher for him.
Yep.
He also works from home too. So like I work face to face with people, so it's a little bit easier. Him, it's much more difficult. So I do feel sad for him because he's like, I really want to make friends, and especially he's a Canadian, and he's like, it's even tougher here. Because people just don't understand him.
Down in Texas as a Canadian, that's got to be weird. It's a good thing that you're you're an attaché for different cultures, right? The ACS, you go home and help out your husband and you can empathize with a Canadian.
My brother visited Texas on a business trip once and was invited into a Texan home. I think it was somewhere around Dallas or Houston. I can't remember. Or Austin, maybe. But he was invited to a Texan home, and he felt like a fish out of water. Like just being a Canadian guy who likes to talk about hockey. And he's down there in Texas.
Y'all have hockey
the thing
up there?
that they matched on was barbecuing. They were able to talk about barbecuing. I would suggest, Amy, talk to Francis, I think his name is. So talk to Francis, tell him, open with a barbecue question. Like, that's your way in, because I think all Texans love to barbecue. They can talk about, the different,
Don't challenge them, though. Don't challenge their
just
barbecue.
ask advice. Like, hey, so if I wanted to, barbecue this steer that I got at the market, is that a thing? I don't know.
Advice
I don't know
from a
barbecuing.
Canadian, yeah. What about this steer I want to barbecue tomorrow?
Would I deep fry that sucker, or what am I gonna do? Yeah.
But I will say this, he has met someone who is actually from the same small town that he's from in Canada.
What?
Ooh.
In Texas?
Which town is that?
He's in outside of Ottawa, near called Elmer.
Elmer. I taught in Arnprior. So that's like 20 minutes from Elmer. So I actually know Elmer, Ontario. Yes. Oh, that's so cool.
Yes.
That's too cool.
So that's helped him, with the ease of, just making a friend here. And he's like, it's great. And they live like right near us. So if we hang out, it's a good time.
Excellent. So can you tell us a little bit about, you said you have some chapters and some topics. Can we talk a little bit about what those topics are that you found were very common enough to sort of dedicate chapters to?
Yes. One can definitely be a huge discussion, I really think. I would say one would be the food, about the sugar, obsessive amount of sugar they put in the food here. It's different tasting here. I would definitely say health insurance and how health insurance works here. I think that was something else that could be a huge soapbox topic. And tipping.
Oh, tell us more.
Yeah, JP doesn't understand tipping. She's Canadian.
So, like what?
Listen,
There's
I just
tipping?
hand them my wallet now. In the U.S., I just take what you need.
Open the wallet.
Over tip
Just open
breakfast
up, it's
waitresses.
yours.
Kids flowing with money. What about taxes? That's not a big thing.
Yeah, so we're in a state with no state tax. It's just a federal
Right.
tax.
Mhm.
But it's about close to 40%. And we're like, where does the money go? And we don't get told where this money goes. Like, yeah, maybe to the military. I don't know. I am not a tax kind of person. So I would probably say what this is, and it's probably not true. But you're like, I'm looking outside, and our roads, obviously in Texas, they've been in construction for many, many years. There's potholes everywhere. Roads are shoveled, like everything. And I'm like, where's the infrastructure going if we're putting all this money in? Is it going to schools? But things with schools and public education, I'm not sure how that's going because I don't work in that sector. But that's another thing too. They don't explain where your money goes, which baffles me. And you're paying all this money, and then you're on top
And
of
now
your
you have to pay it, so you have to wonder where it
pay it.
goes. Now you have
and
to
then you're
pay
hopefully you
it.
get some back from tax season, which it's kind of, maybe a hit or miss. Sometimes I've always broke even, but overseas you file it, but you don't pay anything because you don't make a certain amount of money and you're fine. You pass it. But here you're like, I have so many, you still have to owe, and I had to pay for a tax person, and it was very frustrating. I think that was something I didn't miss.
It's so
for
weird
sure.
because like overseas, you're not worried about a few things like taxes. You have housing taken care of a lot of times by the schools. And one of the things that I don't think I'm ever going to get used to is going back home and not having a maid. All right. When I was in Egypt, I had a maid that came in once a week. In other countries, I've always had maid. Not here, I don't, but I love the idea of having somebody iron for me, and I can support them, and they can be employed by someone who cares about them. Right. I care about them. And I think that's something that's so amazing. And childcare in the States, I don't have children, but everybody talks about how expensive childcare is. I'm like, well, hey, if you're a teacher, go overseas because you can get childcare and a nanny and a maid at next to nothing compared to the States, right? So those are really big topics. So you can talk all night about health insurance, about maids, about family structure, having time away from school. How much time do you spend at school compared to overseas? And it's a different position, I know. But do you go and put in extra hours afterwards and work like a horse? I mean, seriously, in the States.
I think the work-life balance is a lot different too in the U.S. It is more like working, like you work. But I have tried to push myself. Like I am still having a life outside of work. And I usually try to stick to the hours I am working and being disciplined and getting everything I need to get done. There's occasional times here and there I would take work home, but I really push myself and say, nope, it can be done at work or it can be saved for another day.
Conscious effort. Yeah.
Yes. So, yeah.
Did you write anything about animals?
He's a cat
Animal.
guy.
Cats? You brought your cats back with you?
About animals, I've talked about my cats in the book, but not specifically about animals, no.
Where did you actually get your cats?
So one was in China. I had a cat here in the States, but my parents were like, "You're gonna come back after a year. We'll keep your cat here." So I told her, I was like, "Well, I'm not coming back. I'm gonna stay for a second year." And she's like, "All right, well, the cat's mine." I'm like, "Good. I guess I'm not gonna get my cat back," which was really sad. She pretty much stopped him.
Your mom catnapped her.
She did catnap. So I was in my first year. I was like, I want to travel. Like that was my to-do list. And a friend of mine at school was like, "There's a person who's having cats and they need to get rid of them." And I was like, the heartstrings are being tugged a lot. And I decided to get one. And that's how I got my cat Chandler. So he's my first overseas cat. He's still with me. He's 10 now. He just turned 10. So he's like my international buddy. So
I think you've had Chandler longer than you've had your husband.
I have. Yes. Yeah. I even told him, I was like, as a joke, if my cat doesn't like you, I don't.
The great cat test. Oh. So you didn't have any trouble repatriating with your animals, though?
No, it was stressful. He was probably very stressed out because the moving situation, I don't know, he was in cargo, and that was one thing I do regret is not having him
he's
with
probably
me.
drugged up, though.
Yep.
Yeah, I was stressed out. I kind of regret that. It's not putting him with me in the plane instead of having him in cargo. But in Egypt, we got Hattie, and that was our second cat. And we got her, I think, the first year, and now she's still with us, too. So Hattie and Chandler. So
Hattie and Chandler, awesome.
Welcome to the Cat ITP episode.
And the cat
right
guy,
at
I'm
home.
assuming you have a cat?
Well, I did until the summertime. But I've talked previously on air about repatriating with our cat out of Yemen during the civil unrest there. So it was quite the adventure.
And it is a big topic with repatriation because there's a lot of overseas teachers that have animals that travel with them. And we've talked a lot about different animals in different countries, taking them with you, getting them, trying to repatriate them, trying to find a passport for them, et cetera, et cetera. But I think that's a great
more and more
topic.
difficult to get animals into the U.S. for rabies restrictions, the number of countries that are
Blacklisted.
difficult to bring animals in from are growing and growing and growing, and the cost is growing as well. We've talked briefly about that. So I'm really glad to hear that your Chandler and Hattie were able to make it in with you. But it was your husband who had to go to the little room.
Well, he's Canadian. The cats aren't.
They were the easiest ones to
they're
get
dangerous.
through. It was us. It was the hard one.
So,
You got
Amy,
another book?
is that for you? Do you think you and Francis are settled in Houston? You're not going to head overseas again? Tell us a little bit about what you see in the coming years.
Oh, they're going again. I know it.
Okay, so Greg thinks yes.
I want to see what they think.
I think they'll stay around the U.S. I think maybe she's got another book. I think she's contemplating another book. Let's see.
Kids book.
We've
kinda
answered
feel like
for you,
that,
Amy.
too.
You're good.
Okay. Yep.
In my heart, if I had to choose, right off the bat, I would move back overseas. I miss the life overseas for sure. My husband, he does
Called
too.
it.
But we're being strategic here, and we want to, he's going through school and doing all these things, and he's also getting a citizenship. So we want to get his citizenship and, build some foundation here, a little bit of roots, and then we will definitely, depending on where our life takes us, it could change in a matter of, years, but we both do want to go back overseas.
I called it.
Good
Thank
job,
you.
Greg. Good
Yep.
job.
Yep. But you need to be there. He needs to be in the country at least, 180
5 years.
days or more, right?
Yeah, he has to
Okay.
be here. We went through the green card process, and he has to be here at least 5 years before he can apply for
5
citizenship.
years.
Okay.
And then he would travel on a U.S. passport or a Canadian passport at that point?
U.S. passport. I think
US
he
passport.
can keep his Canadian, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
I think so too.
Depends.
I think you
Yeah.
can have dual citizenship.
citizenship.
Well,
Hey, guys.
How about
Get-
another way? Hold on. I just got to ask, is there another book in your future, Miss Amy?
I would love to write, if I do go overseas, I would love to write a book about my life going back over. But I have a few ideas in my mind what I would like to write next. It may be about traveling. It may not be. But yes, there is a book will be coming out eventually.
Well, because I'm seeing a series like the chicken soup, chicken soup for the whatever. I could see living expatriations for children, living
expectations for children,
for teenagers,
yeah,
living expectations for international students that are like university bound. I mean, I'm seeing a whole series here. I don't know about you, Amy.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. I really think that is an amazing next step. So yeah.
What do you call a cat expat, a cat repatriation? Is that
that's
a
an
cat repat?
expectations.
A cat
It's a
expectations?
Expectations.
Here we go. New words again. I want to hear a police story. I want to hear an overseas police story because I know Vietnam. I know I have one.
Knowing Amy, she's got to pick between several.
She's going to have to pick one. Yep.
Like if it's our fault or what I've seen is different. So
Your
Something
choice.
you've experienced, presumably.
It can
okay.
be harmless. So just a fun story.
Yeah.
Either one.
Oh, I'm trying to think of a couple of them, but
She's been court ordered not to talk about a few of them.
you're pretty good. We're like good citizens, so we really do abide by the rules. But the time I would say part of my book is where my husband did get pulled in security. They thought, based on batteries in his carry-on, which was from his Xbox controller, they assumed that he was building a bomb. So
No.
the first step they did, they
Come on.
interrogated him to know, like, why are you building a bomb? And he was like holding his cat. He's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, he had to take the cat out of the carrier. They had to check the cat's carrier. Yeah, they had to check his carry-on like several times. They were interrogating him. They brought like a military guy with a AK rifle. Like he brought like a whole military personnel in, and they were like going on, and it was like 30 minutes, and I'm like through security. I have my cat. I have a lot of our stuff, and I'm sitting there. I'm like, where is he? Like I saw him.
You didn't even know what was going on.
Because you can't see anything. I just saw his body in there, and I was like, why are they bringing a military person in there? I was like, what's going on? And you cannot go back in there.
Nope.
You're
So
like,
long
dude,
story
it's an
short, he was like,
Xbox.
for an Xbox. So he was pretty much like convincing. He's like, I am not. It was just a silly mistake. Like I took the batteries out of my controllers. You could tell this is for a game controller. And they're like, okay, do not come back to Egypt, though. I suggest that. And then he like left. So I was like, well, we're not taking Egypt anytime soon.
Oh, boy.
Oh, so this wasn't in the States. This was leaving Egypt.
Leaving Egypt.
Oh.
I get it.
So they were going through his stuff before you even left Egypt. That's a little scary.
Right. And we're
Yeah,
like,
so then you're like, sayonara, I will not be back.
bye.
Okay. And in your move back home, back to Houston, or moving to Houston, were there 3 things that you felt you needed to make Houston feel like home?
Make it feel like home. I believe all the things we collected overseas, bringing that back with us, felt like home. Having, that's a good question. Make you feel like you're at home. Food, I guess.
Xbox batteries.
Batteries, right? I'm like, really,
Husband, cat.
I think all the paintings and the magnets I've collected, like all those things,
magnets,
is something that's part of me that I have just collected for many years, and I'm like, they're coming with me. It was heavy, but I didn't care at the moment. I think
You're talking about the little magnets that go on your refrigerator. Did you collect those like everywhere you went? You collected little ones?
Yeah. And like
how many do you have
mugs.
now?
Yeah,
My fridge is covered.
So those are things like those little relic things that you just have with you, and you're like, oh, I can't part with them. They're coming with me, and I don't care if I pay the extra fee for the weight. So it's what that would be the.
How many countries have you visited, Amy? Have you counted?
About between 40 and 50, but that's
a great number.
Well done.
It's a large number.
Yes.
Very well done.
Thank
and
you.
now you
but
can communicate with all those kids at school that need someone to talk to, that just don't know how things work. You can connect to them in many ways and say, I've been there, or I was there for a little bit and I love this food because you have great food there, right? Every time I talk to somebody that's Lebanese, I'm like, that's the best food in the world. Lebanese make.
Do you ever tell them, Amy, to bring food in for you? Because I do it every year.
Yes.
I tell them
every week.
every week.
It's
Bring
like,
in
what's
some
my lunch today?
empanadas.
Or when they're like traveling, I was like, oh my gosh, you're going to one of my favorite places. Like it really is. And I was like, and they will bring you back something. You're like, oh, it's like when they bring something back for you. It's really sweet.
Or the Korean kids bring in kimchi or something like that, and people are like, "What's that smell?" And you're like, "It's kimchi."
I know.
Yeah.
It's really nice.
We're going to be drafting a letter of apology to the
Yes.
country of
To the
Korea.
South
for
Korean
their
Why?
kimchi.
Because I like
consulate and the kimchi lobby.
I love kimchi. There's
let's
no
take it
letter
around-
going on.
Let's take it around the horn. We'll start with JP. We'll go to Greg. Then we'll go to Amy. Final thoughts.
Well-
and particularly JP.
I want to, you started with JP and then Greg. So I was ready to jump right in.
Yeah, jump right in, JP. I love the enthusiasm.
Well, Amy, I wanted to thank you for coming on the show. Full disclosure, I met Amy in a presentation of her book with a couple of other authors that we've had on the show, Jess Gosling and Kelly Ridings. And so I'm very glad that Amy also accepted our invitation to come onto the show, especially because I found your topic so new. You know, not many of us talk about repatriation and what does that entail. So I'm really excited to read your book and move it forward with all my friends that are planning on going home and like gifting it to them. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Greg?
I already bought the book. You know, you see me looking up every once in a while at my other screen. I already went on to Amazon and got one. So
There we
you've
go.
already sold more books than me. Just kidding. I sold two. No, I loved this conversation and I want to continue it. I would like to hear back from you on our show in another year or so, or another short time if you want. Come back to our show. Our listeners out there can learn a lot, and they're not always thinking about, we're always thinking about the people going overseas. We don't always talk about the people going back home. So I think it was a great way to open up a conversation that we can continue with some other listeners and some other guests. So thank you very much, and I look forward to your children's book. That's going to be fun too. And
now-
off to Cat Guy. What?
Well, before we hear from Amy, I just want to say, thankfully, JP Mint can reach out to people and get them to accept, because whenever Greg and I reach out to people, we get blocked and reported.
Right.
Just letting you know.
Right. Or slapped.
Amy, what do you think? Final words for our audience, Miss Amy.
Well, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed this conversation. It was really like friends catching up on something that we could just talk for hours. And I really think this is a good topic to talk about because it's really not a popular one, I would say. And there's many people out there who are also having that same experience. So I just want to let them know that they're not alone, and that anytime they need questions or what should I do or how do I adjust to this, like, feel free to email me or contact me on Facebook and Instagram. But I really enjoyed this, and I really hope you invite me back. So just scare you all away.
We would love to have you back.
Thank you.
Ooh.
This is Cat the Cat Guy, thanking you for joining us on ITP this week. I'd like to thank my co-host, JP Mint. You can find her at JP Mint Consulting. Thank you, JP Mint.
Thank you.
I would also like to thank my other co-host, Greg the Single Guy. You can buy his book, International Teaching, the Best Kept Secret in Education. Or is it the other way around?
Yes.
Amy, he can never remember my
At
title.
gonna buy it. I'm gonna buy it.
www.amazon.com or wherever you buy your finer books. I'd also like to thank our special guest, Amy Perrier-Morin. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you. Thank you all.
You can find her Facebook page at Finding Home After Abroad Reverse Culture Shock Support. That's Facebook. I'll be joining that page. You can also find her book, Living Expatations, The Journey of Reparations.
And cat
Reparations.
pactations.
Journey of Repatriation at, again, www.amazon.com or wherever you find your finer books. Thank you, Amy Perrier-Morin. I'm Cat the Cat Guy. You can find me in room 303, writing report cards this week. Thank you all. Goodbye.
Yay. Yeah, stay on for a little bit, Amy.
Amy, you're a ton of fun.
Thank you.
I really do hope you come back on. And
I really, really want to see this become a series. I think I'm
Our new
surprised
expert.
it's
She's
not
our
out
expert.
there, but it needs to be a series, Amy, because I know of dozens of people getting repatriating for their kids to have that one